Did I pronounce that right?
That's good enough.
Okay. Dr. He is a distinguished figure in the world of robotics, notably recognized for his extensive involvement in FTC Team 7172 as a lifelong coach. With a rich background in computer science, holding a doctorate in the field, he has also dedicated years to educating students in computer science. As the head referee emeritus, his understanding of the intricacies of robotics competitions is unparalleled. With an unwavering commitment spanning over a decade, he has been a driving force behind FIRST, epitomizing its values through his roles as a coach, educator, and former PDP member. So thank you so much, Patrick.
All right, thanks. I don't have any slides, so you can leave up whatever you want. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Patrick. That's what I normally go by. As mentioned, I'm the chief referee emeritus for North Texas now. I'm also the PDP emeritus. I'm basically going to try and get like every volunteer role except for judging, where I'm the emeritus for that. So I'm working my way down the list. And all emeritus means I used to be that, and I'm not that anymore, but they still want to honor me with the designation anyway. Before I start in here, how many people, this is your first season in First Tech Challenge? Do you have any newbies in here, any rookies? Okay, good, good. So most of you have been in First Tech Challenge before, which is good. I don't have a lot of paired stuff that I want to do. I have a few topics to cover, but I wanted to open it up for questions. Anything that you ever wanted to ask about the game design, about the rules, anything like that. This is a really good chance to do that. And then if you don't have any questions or don't have anything, I'll be glad to bring up a few. So one or two. So first of all, I'll just open. Does anybody have a burning question they've always wanted to ask a referee? And then yes.
What's the game next season?
What's the game next season? It is called Center Stage, right? And I believe that it will have a red alliance and a blue alliance with two robots on each side. It'll be played on a 12 by 12 field, plus or minus 3/4 of an inch.
Take notes, take notes.
I don't know anything about the specifics about the game yet, but I will be happy to talk it over with you in 3 weeks. I'll give you a sneak preview in 3 weeks. Okay, 3 weeks from today. So just.
And if you guys are in the area, he's going to be doing it at Marcus.
Yes.
So come on out, bring your tape measures. He does the whole. We show the video and stuff like that, but then we let you run down to the field and measure stuff and kind of hold the elements and stuff like that.
I have been told that this is not the case. So several years ago, First Robotics Competition did a competition called Steamworks. And the design of that game actually had human players on the field during the match, right? So if you go back and look at Steamworks, and the backstory I've heard for that is that some of the folks on their game design committee were told, we need one more game idea, so go ahead and do it. And so the designers who were given this task of coming up with one more game idea said, let's just come up with something they'll never accept as being the game. Because the way the games get designed is they come up with a bunch of ideas, and then they have the committee get together and they sort through them and kind of figure out which one they want to do for each year and so forth. So they came up with one and they said, let's just solve this problem. Let's pick a game that they'll never accept. Let's put human people on the field in the game. They'll never accept that one, and that's the one that got chosen. So this year's game is called Center Stage. So maybe the center of the field will have a stage, right? I'm told that's not actually, but there's not enough room for one. But who knows, right? So I don't know anything about this year's game beyond what anybody else says.
But we can engage in speculation, right? Speculation?
Maybe a little bit later.
Oh.
I'll speculate a little bit. I'm going to talk about rules and stuff like that, as opposed to this year. Because just wait 3 weeks, right? Just wait 3 weeks. And yes, come to a kickoff. Yeah, there's one at Marcus. There's one at Aledo High School on the west side of the place. So the two big things that I wanted to definitely cover today is, first of all, we are again continuing what we started last year, which is that in previous seasons, prior to last season, at earliest season events, the inspectors would sometimes be a little bit loose on inspection rules. Like if you showed up with a robot that didn't completely meet all of the guidelines, we'd still let you play, right? We'd say, okay, well, it's close enough or whatever. Last year, we started being strict, that at your first meet, If you show up with a robot that doesn't meet all of the guidelines, then you're not going to get to play. And since it's just the first meet, we don't feel like we're killing your season as it would be for a lot of people if we were doing that. So definitely look at all of the inspection rules, and when you go to that first event, make sure that you've gone through the checklist. Now, the example of a rule that got overlooked last season was the signal sleeve markers. So I was head referee in an event, and in about the third, teams had gone through a couple of rounds of matches, and I got a team on the field and I looked at their signal sleeve, and they had printed it out and colored it all in with markers, right? So each different side they had colored in with a different marker. And it turns out that was against the inspection rules, that you could not use colored marker on the signal sleeve. Whatever you used had to be printed. So you couldn't write your team number on there. You couldn't color in things with markers, things like that. And so I pointed that out to them and I said, I'm sorry, I have to disallow the sleeve. You're not able to use that in this match or in any future matches because it doesn't do the rules. Now, of course, what a team would say at that point is they'll be like, but it was allowed before, so why is it suddenly illegal now? And my answer was, well, nobody apparently caught it before, but now that I've seen it, you can't use that particular sleeve. And so that's one place where if they had looked at the rules and caught that particular thing, then it would not have, they wouldn't have been surprised by it when they got there. What ended up happening, they weren't very happy. Coach was not happy with that particular thing because literally, they were on the field. I noticed it. Said you have to take the sleeve off. They took the sleeve off. Their coach was yelling, "Why is the sleeve off?" from the stands, right? They're trying to communicate back with their coach why there's no sleeve there. This is all before the match begins. We play the match, and their autonomous didn't work, but they were otherwise able to play. As a head referee, that's why I feel like it's okay for me to say that part's not legal. You can't use it. It's not like I told them you can't play this match. I said, you can't use that sleeve and you're not eligible for the bonus. It's a bonus, right? That you get for having a proper signal sleeve and be able to do that. Because a lot of teams will say, oh, you're penalizing us because we didn't have a valid sleeve. I'm not penalizing you. I'm not giving you a bonus. It's not a penalty. I'm not reducing your score. I'm just not increasing your score because of that happening. So, it's very important to watch for those kind of things because you may get caught depending on who the head referee is and who's there. It's just better to know beforehand. After that match, I was met in the question box by the coach of the team that was not happy with me because of this being done. So how many people hear alarm bells when you hear that? Right? Right? Just a few, right? But notice it's all the ones who've been around, right? Coaches should never be coming to the question box, right? But I could tell that this coach was really, really upset. And so I did what a head referee is not supposed to do, which is I took the coach's question. What I would normally be trained to do is to say, I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer your question. You need to bring a student up here. But this particular coach probably would have gone ballistic. So the coach came to the question box and they said, very huffingly, like they knew better, which don't ever think you know better than a head referee, right? Unless you do.
Mistake number one.
Unless you do. Yeah, well, if you know better, it's okay. But make sure you know. So the coach comes up and says, can you please show me in the rule book where it says that you're not allowed to use markers on sleeves, right? So I grabbed the rule book and I turned it to the page and I said, there. And that's a yellow card, by the way. And so I just very calmly, I turned to the rule book and said, there it is. It says you're not allowed to use markers, felt pins, or anything on your signal sleeves. And the coach just did one of these, just right, ran off, and that was like, it was an event that's enough to be memorable. It's not good to be memorable for such things. So the other part that I wanted to cover was question box etiquette. Just very quickly, just know that the question box is there so that the referees and the teams can come to an understanding about what the rules mean. There are a lot of rules. I'm often, people often say that I'm noted for knowing the rules to a level of detail that is much beyond what you normally get. And that's just because I study them. I love knowing the rules. I love knowing all the intricacies. I love being able to talk about what do you do in the situation where robot A does this and robot B 3 seconds later does this move. And then that seems to violate this rule, but not if it's a Tuesday, right? Sorts of things. There are a group of us referees that go through and look at all of these really kind of corner cases and say, what is supposed to happen there? And so that's part of the reason why I know the rules. But when you get to the question box, know what rule it is that you think has been violated or not been violated. If you feel like you got a penalty and you shouldn't have gotten the penalty, go to the question box with a manual. You should have a manual with you and say, this is, you know, what the penalty says, and we don't believe that we violated that. The referee, if it's a good head referee, should be able to say, you know, this is why we think this penalty applies or why this wasn't scored, and get down into that level of detail. Always be friendly about it. The other thing to do is to always be aware of the Q&A forum. So there is a Q&A forum where teams can ask questions about rule clarifications, where things like the corner cases come up, and then the game design committee will come up with an answer. Sometimes it's a good answer. Sometimes it's not a good answer, but you have to live with it. It always helps to know all the Q&A forum rules. I will say that the head referees and the referees are supposed to be up to date on the Q&A forum rules. They are not always up to date. We even had a couple of situations on our team at the World Championship where we knew the Q&A forum rules better than the head referee that we were talking to. And the head referee, when they saw the Q&A forum rule, basically did a double take and said, is that really a rule? Like, is that really a rule? It's never been that way. And it didn't affect anything for our scores, as it turned out, but that sort of thing happens. So for question box etiquette, it really helps if you know what you're talking about, have the rules, have somebody on your team who really knows the rules really, really well, backwards and forwards, to be able to do those things. The third thing that I wanted to cover, and then I'll open it up again for questions again, is when you have a dispute or have a question about the rules, talk to the head referee. Don't talk to the other referees. We have a lot of situations where people will just go find whatever referee they want, and they'll try to have a discussion about match scoring or things of that nature that happen with the regular referee. And although the head referees will tell the regular referees not to do that, sometimes the referees do that. So I was at another event where the event is over, the matches have been played. I go over to the scorekeeping system. I and the scorekeeper, we agree that we're done, we submit the scores. And then a team member came up and said, did you change our score like you're supposed to? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, there was a scoring error in match number whatever. And I talked to the referee about it. And they said, yes, the score would get changed. But we didn't see it change in any of the things. And I said, which referee did you talk to? And they said, they couldn't point out the actual referee they talked to. I said, if you didn't talk to me as the head referee, it didn't happen, right? There's no way that I can put a scoring change in, because we said during the driver's meeting, if you have any questions about scoring the rules, send a student to the question box and talk to the head referee. And I made it very clear that I was the only person authorized to make changes. But they came up and they said they had talked to another referee, and the referee agreed that it would get fixed, and it never got fixed, and it never got told to me, so it didn't happen. So when you're going to talk to them, talk to the head referee. Don't talk to the other referees. Don't talk to the other referees at the end of the match. At the end of the match, all the robots have stopped. Don't go telling all the referees, did you get this? Did you get this? Did you get this? Right? Let the referees finish their work. If there needs to be a discussion, that should be with the head referee afterwards. So that's all I had to begin with. I will say that this last season was really, really good. We trained up a bunch of really good referees. So I know that the intercommittee, the group working on putting all the events together, we feel really good about the quality of the referee crew that we have coming forth this season. So with that, I'll open it up for any other questions, any other comments. Yes, Casey?
Just quick commentary. So you see all those guys in the striped shirt and you immediately think referee, and what you want is a guy wearing that.
Well, it's actually pretty rare.
Oh.
So a lot of times the head referee is also in a striped shirt. right? This is actually a head referee shirt for FRC, and it's not like you could just go out and buy one of these, but I usually wear them. So if you see one in this kind of shirt, talk to them, right? If you see this shirt, talk to them. But otherwise, the other referees are often just stripes.
We have a question from online.
Yes.
That was so what do you think of the current Q&A forum system? Many have complained about the difficulty to find decisions. Should we start moving to a better way to inform rule changes as a result of rulings?
Okay, so to repeat the question was, what do I think about the current Q&A forum and should we go to a better way?
Yes.
The current Q&A forum is way better than what we had before, like 2 or 3 years ago. So in some sense, this is the better way. So yes, it's very confusing. Part of the reason why it's confusing is I have to be politic in how I say this. I think part of the reason why it's confusing is because the rules, when they get first released, aren't as precise as they probably need to be. So there's a lot of questions that are just basic clarifications of the rules. That's really hard from a game design committee point of view. Like if you go through and say, we're going to come up with a new game every year, and we're going to devise rules for that game, and we have to think of every possible situation that might occur, or every possible situation that a bunch of teenage creative types might think of, and figure out how to address that. It's really a hard thing to do. So you end up with a lot of questions in the Q&A forum that are that way. I like the way it's done in FRC. And so I would love to see FTC move to something like what FRC does. In FRC, when there's a rule change or a rule update or a rule clarification, they put it back into the manual. Oh, that would be cool. Right? And so you don't, and they issue weekly updates. They issue weekly updates with the changes in the manual from the previous week, so that you can very quickly keep up once a week, and they're usually not very long. You can keep up with and say, here are all the updates, and go over and be able to do that. So I like the way that FRC does it. And I'm a head referee in FRC too, and in FRC, it's much nicer because they've had enough time to work with the rules and with the way the rules get worded, that there's a lot less room for referee judgment, which is really nice. FRC referees hate it when there's something that says, if the referee has to kind of judge something. They like things to be black and white. First Lego League is the same way. First Lego League, you either scored or you didn't, right? There's not a lot of wiggle room about, did you have to do this? In First Tech Challenge, there's a lot of subjective rulings that many of us don't like, but it's part of the game. So the Q&A system is way better than the forum that they had before. It's much easier to search. It could still be better still, so I would welcome improvements if they happen. But I know it's a lot of work to keep that up to date. And it's hard to keep up with, like last year in Freight Frenzy, there was something like 380 Q&A forum questions that were posted. I don't know how many of them were answered, but there were 380, and just keeping up with all of those gets to be really long. Now, a lot of them are Q&A 24. Somebody asks a question, the game design committee answers it. And then in Q&A 40, did you really mean that answer in Q24? And the game design committee says, yes, we really meant that answer. And then in number 60, in the previous question, you said you really meant it, but what about this case, right? Last year was really, really notorious for people trying to figure out legal forms of defense, right? What are the ways that we can block another team from scoring? Can we do this? Can we do this? What about this specific situation? What about this hypothetical situation? Could we block them from scoring this way? Finally, the game design committee got frustrated with all the questions and said, we're not going to tell you what is legal defense, right? We're not going to tell you that you can do this to block other people from scoring because it's against the spirit of the game. But there were dozens of questions just trying to explore the ways in which you could prevent another team from scoring and what was the outcome. So it would help if we had some clear rules to begin with, given that that's really hard. The Q&A system is about as good as I think we can do right now. It's a good question. Thanks for the good question. Any others? Online or here? Yes.
under the country. Whoever had their output on top of the first had the advantage over racing on there. What do you think about like when the driver sees that their robot is different, but the referee, of course, from a different angle, sees something different?
Okay, so just so everybody can hear what the question was, and I'll repeat it, see if I get it. The question was, well, what do I think about ambiguous rules? And the example given was the ability to score by being over the junction or first, right? So first of all, you mentioned that whoever got there first had the advantage, but actually for the top teams, you wanted to be second. You didn't want to be first. Because if they were going to score, you wanted to score right on top of them to regain ownership. So there were actually teams that had robots that they would go and look, and the robot would detect there's another one there, and it would wait. And as soon as the other one scored, it would score. And do it automatically. It was like they would do this in autonomous. So the way the games are designed, it's sometimes there's going to be a split-second call, right? Who got there first? What was there? As a referee, I tend to, if I can't definitively identify who violated the rule, I'd rather do a no call than make a call that's not certain. So, you know, it's like, it's that way. This last year's game was the perfect example of you have you have 3 referees. Two of them are working on scoring, right? So they're not as easy to be able to do this. You have 3 referees trying to watch 25 junctions, 2 substations, 4 terminals, plus whatever else is happening, right? They're gonna miss something. There's no way that 3 people can watch all of the interactions of 4 robots on all of those junctions at once. And so sometimes things get missed, and that's just it's an unfortunate part of the game. There were some ambiguities in that specific rule where referees didn't understand that the protected area was the washer going up as opposed to the top of the pole. Some teams didn't understand this either. So if a pole is leaning this way and a team has a cone over the pole there, and another team knocks it off, it's no penalty because their cone was not above the washer. It was at the base, right? And some referees did not recognize that that was a difference. Similarly, there's a pole here, it's leaning over for whatever reason, a robot's against it or whatever, and a team has a cone over the washer, and the other team moves the pole. That's interference in last year's game, because the protected zone was the washer that was at the base of the pole. Sometimes those little nuances get lost on referees. You hopefully won't encounter that in North Texas. We're getting good training. We have our volunteer academies. We have a lot of work that we're doing to train our referees. I'll come right back to it, right? We have competed in other regions where it was very clear that the referees were not fluent in the details of the rules. We were at one event last season where the referees were scoring the autonomous bonus as being that the robot was in the target tile instead of completely in. And that's very different. Completely in is much harder to achieve than partially in. And so, you know, there's sometimes ambiguous rules. Your best bet is if you think something's being called in ambiguously, go talk to the head referee. Sometimes the head referee knows what the rule is, but some of the referees don't, and the head referee hasn't figured that out. So just bring it to their attention. Sometimes you'll get a head referee who just doesn't, and again, I don't expect this in North Texas, because we have some really good ones. But sometimes you'll find a head referee that's just not really fluent on it. Do the best you can to educate them or to let them know your interpretation of the rule. If they refuse to accept it, you just have to live with it for the day. It's just the way that it is. Okay, I had a question here. So the short answer is no. So the question was, will referees ever take video evidence? And the short answer is that FIRST does not allow us to look at video evidence. So we can't look at pictures, we can't look at hand drawings, we can't look at video, we can't look at cell phone. And a lot of people say, oh man, it would be so much easier if you had video evidence. Let me tell you, video evidence makes things worse, sometimes not better. And I have had this happen at events because what we will sometimes do is The event's over, everybody's gone home, right? The referee is like, okay, there was that call that this team contested, right? I wonder if the video shows anything different. We'll go back and look at the video afterwards. We know we can't change the score or anything, but we just want to know, did we get it right or did we get it wrong? And I've had several occasions where I've seen a video and I look at the video, it's like, we got it right. And then the team, after I talked to them, about it afterwards, they show me a video where if I had seen their video, I would have said, we got it wrong. Because so much of it depends upon the angle of the video, what you can see and what you can't see, and so forth. And so if all of a sudden you get in a situation where you have dueling videos, now what do you do? And all the time you're just holding things up and doing things like that. So until there's a standard for how videos could be made at a field, where all of the angles and these are the official ones, I don't think we'll ever be able to take video evidence that comes from like something in the stands or anything like that. And then Lon, you have a comment?
Yeah, so also if you show a video, the referee might notice a penalty that they didn't notice before. You go, oh, I missed that penalty.
I've had that happen a lot too.
One strategy that you can't show the referee a video, but we had an event last year where there was a dispute, and the alliance, they went to the opposing the opposing alliance and showed them the video, and they got their opposing alliance to concede that point should have been there, and because they were gracious professionals, the red alliance and the blue alliance came to the head referee and begged them to change the score. That make sense?
So, yep, you can possibly do that, but I don't see video review as being anything official. One thing I have done at some events, just because sometimes you just want to know if you were right or wrong and be able to talk about the video without necessarily changing the score. And so probably when first headquarters hears about this, they'll send me a nasty note or something like that. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, I can watch your video, but I cannot change anything once I see the video. Like the decision stands, there's no discussion, there's no change possible. And I'll look at the video and we can discuss it so that we can understand better what happened. But even if I was wrong, I won't be able to change it because I've looked at your video. And some teams go for that. Some teams are like, yes, I just want to know, it feels good if the referee can say, I got that call wrong. I'm sorry, I can't change it, but clearly your video seems to indicate that I got it wrong. This last year in FRC, I had a bunch of situations where teams were like, you guys got the wrong call. And I went back and looked at the videos and we never got it wrong.
Yeah, if probably wrong.
I was very proud this last year. Of all the videos I reviewed, we never got a call wrong. We always got it right. So I was very, very happy about that. Any other questions? That's a good question. Yes, Casey.
Is there a gracious or appropriate way? The box is basically after the match, but if we're standing on and I'm looking over there, and I know the Alliance's robots is outside of 18 inches because their intake fell out or something like that. Is there a gracious and professional way to, hey, can you check that robot over there for size?
For that one, I think you can just ask the referee or an FTA, right? And to me, it sounds kind of, so first of all, I would say don't do it for ticky-tack stuff, right? Like if there's a robot you think, oh, they might be 18¼ inches, don't call that, right? That's just being petty, right? But if you see that their robot, if you believe their robot is there, right, just raise your hand, get the attention of a referee and say, is that robot actually in size? Most head referees will say, oh, we'll go check, right? And I don't know that, it doesn't seem ungracious unless you really start to push the issue.
I'm talking about a situation where there's a whole intake that they measured it all folded up, and now they wanted to start folding it full and the whole intake.
Right. And the other question that we often ask as referees, especially if the matches are running late, the day is running long and stuff like that, is we'll look and we'll say, do we believe that the team is going to get a strategic or material advantage from it, and that such that we need to stop the flow of things, that we need to stop them from going. There are a few times where I look at a robot and it's clear that their intake is out by an inch, right? And we're about to start the match. I don't want to just stop it knowing that all I'm going to do is stop it, make them go up. We have to re-randomize right? And then I'm gonna say 3, 2, 1, go, and it's just gonna pop out, right? It's the first thing. So there are some times where we might say we're gonna go with it anyway. But again, it's about making sure that the tournament runs well as opposed to being ticky-tack on every subscription. Any other questions? This is your chance. After this, you have to wait for the question box. No, not really. No, you can ask between matches or between events.
You got one.
Yes.
So we can make our robot bigger, like during the game by having them slow down.
Yes. There was a team this year that actually had a robot that stretched 13 feet wide. And it's sitting, where is the robot? Did you put it right? You didn't bring it in? Yeah, it's out there, but it's out front. But 7172's robot was able to stretch 13 feet. That's not common. I wouldn't recommend it, but because you can get all sorts of penalties if you do it wrong and stuff like that. But yeah, in fact, almost all of the games are designed every season where to be successful at some tasks, your robot has to go beyond 18 and sometimes significantly beyond 18 inches. So like this year, some of the poles were about 3 feet high. So that meant by definition, if your robot was going to score, it was going to have to go above 18 inches to get the cone on top of that pole. So very common for robots to get bigger than 18 inches. It just has to be that way at the start of the match. It has to fit the side of 18 inches at the start of the match. And then once the match bell sounds, your robot can expand to however far you want, but staying on the field. Yeah. Yes.
What's like the head referee and the referee's way of thinking thought process about excessive defense and block?
So, in general, the advantage should always go to the scoring robot, right? And every year, First Tech Challenge, the game design committee tries to create game rules that sharply limit the types of defense that are allowed. So they're very quick to say you are allowed to do defense, but then they very quickly after that, but you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. And what the game design committee is looking for is they don't want any type of defense that can shut down the game entirely and make it boring, right? So one form of defense this last season, the robot parks in the substation, right? Now, if an opponent robot parks in the opponent's substation, right? So if an opponent's robot comes and parks in the substation, the human player can't put any cones in, and that alliance is dead, right? So that's a big no-no, major penalties and stuff like that. And so when we get to a situation and we're looking at the rules, what we want to do is we want to say, is that form of defense, if everybody did it, does it just completely shut a team down? Does it completely shut an alliance down? Those are almost always frowned upon, just as a general rule, because you know, so it generally comes down to that for defense. And there are different opinions throughout the FTC community about how much defense should be allowed or how much it should be circumscribed. I was pleased that this last year, I felt like all of the opinions I formulated for myself and for the referees that I was working with about defense ended up being confirmed by the game design committee through Q&A posts. That they tended to agree with the way I had been interpreting things, which meant I felt like I had a good handle on it. And people who were telling me I was wrong soon discovered in a Q&A post that I was actually saying what the game design committee intended. So I was pretty happy with that overall. So just in general, right? Defense is allowed, but not if it's going to shut a team down, not if it's going to shut the opponent down. If the intergalactic head ref, Mark Edelman, and that is his title in FTC, is the intergalactic head referee. He always says you should win by playing the game, not by playing the rules. So play the game, score, try and do better than your opponents. Don't try to win by preventing your opponents from scoring, from doing well. So play the game, don't play the rules. Any others? Yes.
Just a follow-up question. What's like the exact definition of shadowing? Because I know in power play it's kind of very easy to know what they score, they have to score it back.
So the exact definition of shadowing, if there was one rule that I could fix in the game manuals, it would be the shadowing, right? but to make it clearer. So the way I've described it in, the region, in the North Texas region over the many years that I've been a head referee, and the way that seemed to be confirmed by the rulings of this past season is shadowing is whenever you are in a spot, a robot tries to get around you and you move to block. That is shadowing, right? They're trying to get to a spot, and if you move to block them from getting to that spot, you are then shadowing. So if you're in a spot and it's the shortest path and a robot is trying to get to something that's on the other side of you and you're not moving, right? And they start complaining that you're blocking them because you're preventing the easy way to get there to wherever they're trying to go. That's not a penalty usually. But if they go and they go, because if they can go around you to get there, then that's what they should do, right? But if they start to go around you and you say, I'm gonna block that way, that's the point at which it's shadowing. So that's always been my rule for shadowing, is you're in the way of getting somewhere, and if you move to prevent them when they try and go around, that's where shadowing is. Yes.
It's off season, so my rule can have a little dusty, but if I'm not mistaken, the rule specifically says locks
all paths.
All paths. So what do you say to the situation where, let's just say, call it path, there are 6 paths, and they shadowed 5 of them, or they followed 5 of them, but they didn't block all paths. There was one that you could always go to. So technically, they didn't fall under the rule of blocking all paths. So does that really qualify under that rule?
And this is why I don't like that rule, because of the word all, right? The word all. So let me use your example, right? Because this is the one that I came up with. So I've got a robot here, and there's another one, and from where the opponent robot is, or the offensive robot is, they want to get to somewhere, and you say there are 6 paths, right? So they try the first one that's available, and you move to block that. Now there's 5 paths left, right? And now they try another one, so you block that one. Now there's 4 paths left. What does the referee have to do? The referee has to keep track of every possible path that they could have used and say, when were all of them blocked, right? And a referee can't do that, right? Because there may be like many, many different paths to something. And it's just too much to ask a referee to say, to go through, because the team is there. The team can keep in mind, I'm gonna leave that one open, and I'm gonna block all of the other ones, right? Or they can kind of keep in mind, but the referee doesn't know what the defensive team is planning to do. And so that word all has been the subject of so much discussion on FTC forums, within the referee community, on the game design committee forums, so much about what does all mean. That the answer that I've come up with that seems to fit every year is the one I gave. If you're there and somebody's trying to get somewhere and you block, right? You move the block, then that's shadowing, and that should do it. And there's a lot of people who will point to, but they still had another path on this side. And if you say, well, I do that, well, they still had a third path over here, right? That's too much to keep track of. So that's why. So the shadowing rule is the one rule I really want to see cleaned out. We'll see if they do that this year. I know I'm probably over time, so.
Yeah, maybe the last question. I don't know if anybody asked it. So according to the game menu 1 change so far, there's like laser device, type 1 laser device in the list. So is that an indication like LiDAR could be possibly allowed this season?
So if you have a sensor like LiDAR, and it's a class 1 laser device, and whatever all the other rules are about it, then I would probably read that as being legal. And this is a case where when you have such a sensor, then you might want to ask about the specific one in the Q&A forum to get it clear. Now, to be clear about that, a spinning LiDAR would not, right? So one that has a laser that's on a turret that spins around, because that contains a motor, and that would not be a legal motor, right? So so as far as I know, we don't have any active motion sensors that have been legal, and so I would not include a spinning turret one. Now, if you had your own sensor and you put it on your own servo turret or something and bopped it around, Sure, that would be fine. Yes.
So what do you mean laser be a directed light source?
And there's a specific rule this season in Game Manual 1 that says these types of sensors are allowed, including, it just says class 1 laser. Previous seasons it said only the Rev 2-meter distance sensor was allowed. This year, the rule has been changed to say the class 1 laser sources, which are obviously directed
I
light,
think it's for some.
are allowed with certain restrictions. So I don't know what the directed lights, I'd have to go back and look at the directed lights.
Huh.
It's 100%.
So like really advanced teams like building their own both laser LiDAR system.
But awesome.
All right.
I don't know that it'll help. I don't know that it'll help very much. I
We
mean,
don't know the game yet,
Yeah,
but some games that we get, I can see,
but
really, really useful.
potentially, yeah. So anyway, that's my guess. I know we'll get more details when we see the game. There will be, I'm told, there will likely be a Game Manual 1 update released on kickoff day. Because I've been in communication with First Headquarters on a few things where I was like, did y'all really mean this in Game Manual 1, the one y'all just released? And they're like, oh, we didn't think of that. So they said there's gonna be some updates in Game Manual Part 1 as well. And then of course there'll be the Q&A forum. We'll see where it goes. All right, any other quick ones? If not, I'm gonna call it here so we can get to the raffle. Thank you all very much. Have a great season. I hope to see